I remember the night as if it were etched into my very soul. A lavish family dinner held in a sleek, modern townhouse overlooking the shimmering skyline of San Francisco. The dining room was resplendent with warm, ambient lighting, high-backed chairs, and a long table laden with exquisite dishes that promised an evening of celebration and unity. I had spent weeks preparing for this gathering, believing it to be an opportunity to showcase not just our family's accomplishments, but also the promise of our future together. I sat at the head of the table, quietly absorbing the gentle hum of conversation and laughter that filled the room. The clink of fine china and crystal glasses against each other created a soundtrack that, at first, imbued me with a sense of contentment and belonging. However, as the evening progressed, an unsettling tension began to weave its way into the fabric of the event. I found myself glancing around at the faces of our relatives, some smiling, some with a trace of curiosity, and others with an almost imperceptible note of skepticism, as if they too sensed that something was amiss. I was deeply engrossed in the conversation with an uncle about potential tech innovations in the shifting paradigms in Silicon Valley when I noticed a peculiar change in the atmosphere. My wife, Vanessa, who had always carried herself with an air of unshakable confidence, suddenly sat up straighter, her eyes glinting with a mixture of anger and something far colder. Before I could process her sudden shift in demeanor, Vanessa abruptly stood, her chair scraping harshly against the polished floor. In that moment, time itself seemed to slow down, every second stretching out with agonizing clarity. With an expression that bordered on disdain, she produced a stack of papers from her clutch, a shocking revelation to everyone present, and without a trace of hesitation, she flung them across the table in my direction. I remember the crisp sound as the papers scattered, each fluttering down like a defiant proclamation. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to make sense of what was unfolding right before my eyes. In the midst of this chaos, Vanessa's attention was drawn away from me entirely. With a sneer that cut deeper than any blade, she turned to the man who now stood beside her, a tall, impeccably dressed figure whose aura exuded wealth and self-assured entitlement. Damien Roth, as I later learned, had been the secret companion behind her confident smirks and subtle dismissals throughout the evening. I watched, paralyzed by disbelief and a sudden, visceral humiliation, as Vanessa locked lips with Damien. The intimacy they shared was deliberate, an act meant not only to signal the end of what we once called a partnership, but to announce to everyone present that my role in this family had been abruptly and irreversibly diminished. As their kiss deepened, I could hear Vanessa's voice cut through the ambient noise of the gathering, sharp and disdainful. "Nobody will ever buy your ridiculous gadget." Her words, delivered with venom, resonated in the charged silence that followed. I felt a peculiar mix of shock, humiliation, and an ember of defiant determination ignite deep within me. Each syllable that left her lips seemed designed to belittle me, not only as a husband, but also as an innovator whose vision had been under constant scrutiny by those who once cheered me on. The betrayal stung more acutely because it wasn't merely the end of our marriage, but a public repudiation of everything I had worked for, everything that I had dared to dream. I looked around at the faces of our relatives. Those who had once regarded me with quiet admiration now wore expressions of shock, pity, or even a cold curiosity. Some exchanged furtive glances as if confirming the scandal that was unfolding before their very eyes, while others remained in stunned silence. The opulent setting of the dinner seemed suddenly grotesque in its juxtaposition to the raw, emotional carnage playing out. In that surreal moment, I felt isolated, abandoned even amidst a room full of people who had once been my family. The laughter and clinking glasses, which had moments before felt like the harmonious pulse of life, now only served to undo the deep void that was rapidly forming within me. I struggled to rise from my seat, my hands trembling as I tried to gather the fragments of dignity that the night had so mercilessly shattered. Every fiber of my being screamed for an explanation, a reason behind Vanessa's unceremonious declaration and the calculated cruelty of her actions. My mind raced as I considered every memory, every moment that had led to this catastrophic evening. Had I been so blind to the creeping decay of our marriage? Had my relentless pursuit of innovation and my obsessive commitment to NanoNexus driven a wedge between us? These questions, sharp and unyielding, whirled around in my head even as I attempted to steady my racing pulse. Even as I stood there, feeling the raw sting of betrayal, an undercurrent of determination began to build within me. A determination born not just of wounded pride but of the knowledge that every derision, every slight, had fueled a secret ambition I had harbored in solitude. As I slowly retrieved the scattered divorce papers, each one a stark symbol of the life I thought I shared with Vanessa, I felt the sting of humiliation transform into a quiet, relentless resolve. The memory of her sneer and her words became an unexpected catalyst, urging me to channel the pain into a force of transformation. The dinner, which was meant to be a celebration, had instead become the turning point in my life. I realized that in that moment of public disgrace, I was also being freed from a chain of expectations and doubts that had long held me back. The very thing Vanessa had derided, the so-called ridiculous gadget, was a manifestation of countless hours of sleepless nights, relentless trials, and unyielding hope. And as I stood in the midst of the chaos, I vowed to myself that her words would not define me, nor would her betrayal extinguish the spark of innovation that burned so fiercely within me. In the silent aftermath of the confrontation, as the murmurs of our disbelieving relatives filled the room, I sensed that an irreversible transformation was taking place. The humiliation, though bitter and raw, was giving way to a newfound clarity. I could almost hear the faint, encouraging whisper of destiny, urging me to rise above the pettiness of personal vendettas and to focus on the larger canvas of my ambitions. I knew then that the path I had chosen, the unyielding pursuit of groundbreaking innovation, would demand sacrifices and, perhaps, painful solitude. Yet it was a price I was now more than willing to pay. Stepping away from the dining table felt like shedding a heavy, oppressive layer of my old life. As I moved towards a quiet corner of the room, I could sense the weight of every disparaging word, every condescending laugh, and every dismissive glance. Yet with each step, that weight was transforming into the fuel for my determination. The world outside that elegant dining room might have been steeped in superficial glitz and shallow accolades, but I knew that beneath the veneer of wealth and status lay the true measure of one's worth, a measure that could only be defined by the courage to innovate, to challenge the norms, and to dare to dream when the odds were stacked against you. In the final moments of that tumultuous evening, as I retreated into the solitude of my own thoughts, I felt both the sting of betrayal and the fierce pulse of determination coalesce within me. The dinner, with all its ornate trappings and feigned gaiety, had inadvertently become the crucible in which my resolve was reforged. I vowed that the very next step in my journey would be to transform the very thing that Vanessa had scorned into the emblem of my triumph, a testament to the power of persistence and the audacity of vision. And so, as the night drew to a close, I silently promised that this was not the end but merely the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where every derisive word, every act of betrayal, would serve as the stepping stone towards a future defined by innovation, resilience, and ultimately vindication. That night, alone in the modest sanctuary of our downtown apartment, a stark contrast to the opulence of the townhouse, I sank into the worn-out armchair that had witnessed countless moments of both joy and despair. The silence of the room was profound, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city that never truly slept. As I sat there in the dim light of a solitary desk lamp, I replayed every detail of the dinner over and over in my mind. The memories were as vivid as they were painful. The sound of Vanessa's voice slicing through the air, the shocking sight of her throwing the divorce papers, and the undeniable betrayal as she embraced Damien with an intimacy that left no room for doubt. In those long hours of solitude, every cruel word and every sneer felt magnified, echoing relentlessly in the quiet of the night. I allowed myself to relive each moment, my mind dissecting every nuance of her expression and the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in her tone. It was a self-inflicted torment, an agonizing loop of betrayal and regret. Yet, amid this maelstrom of heartache, a secret triumph began to simmer beneath the surface, a victory known only to me. I had guarded this secret with the utmost care, concealing it from prying eyes and skeptical hearts. My startup, NanoNexus, was on the brink of an achievement that would forever alter the landscape of technology. Even as Vanessa had sneered at what she deemed my ridiculous gadget, I had worked tirelessly, driven by the belief that innovation was born of vision and tenacity, not the shallow approval of those around us. The gadget, capable of sensing and responding to human emotions with an almost uncanny accuracy, was more than a mere product. It was the culmination of years of sleepless nights, countless setbacks, and an unwavering belief in a future that only a few dared to imagine. In the solitude of that apartment, the pain of the dinner's humiliation gradually gave way to the exhilarating pulse of impending success. I reached for my phone, and with trembling fingers, I scrolled through the latest acquisition numbers for NanoNexus. The figures leaped off the screen with an almost surreal clarity. Every number, every upward spike in the graph, was a silent rebuke to the doubts and derisions that had plagued me. I was on the cusp of history. By tomorrow, when the press would be ablaze with the news, the world would learn that Google had acquired NanoNexus for billions, a sum that was not only a financial windfall but a resounding affirmation of my vision. Sitting there, I allowed myself a rare moment of pride. The success that was now so palpably within reach was not merely a vindication of my work, but also a quiet testament to the strength that comes from enduring betrayal. The thought of Vanessa's mocking words and the public spectacle of that dinner now served as a powerful counterpoint to the brilliance of what I had built. Every harsh word that had once stung was now transformed into a spark that ignited my determination. I could almost hear the murmurs of disbelief from those who had doubted me, a chorus that would soon be silenced by the triumphant roar of innovation. Yet, even as the warmth of this newfound hope began to thaw the icy grip of despair, a lingering sadness took root in the recesses of my mind. I couldn't help but reflect on the life that had once been so full of promise, a life where dreams were shared and futures were planned together. The pain of Vanessa's betrayal was not merely the loss of a partner, but the shattering of a shared vision that I had once believed in with every fiber of my being. It was a sorrow that was both deeply personal and, in a way, necessary. A reminder that every achievement often comes at the cost of sacrifices we never truly anticipate. In those solitary hours, as I sat amidst the quiet hum of the apartment, I found myself at a crossroads. On one path lay the bitter memory of betrayal and heartache. On the other, the exhilarating promise of a future forged by relentless innovation. I realized that the secret triumph of NanoNexus was more than just a business milestone. It was a declaration that despite the pain inflicted upon me, I was still the architect of my own destiny. The very people who had ridiculed my dreams and derided my work were now, unwittingly, the catalyst for my transformation. I began to make plans in that quiet darkness, plans that were both bold and resolute. I envisioned a future where every setback, every act of betrayal, would be repurposed into the building blocks of a new empire. A future where the brilliance of my invention would speak louder than any scoff or sneer. I could almost see the headlines forming in my mind's eye. Google acquires NanoNexus for $4.2 billion. Silicon Valley's boldest bet pays off. Those words were not just a promise of financial success. They were the culmination of every late night, every moment of self-doubt, and every ounce of determination that had propelled me forward even in the darkest of times. I felt as if I were holding a secret key to the future, a future that would redefine what was possible, not just in the realm of technology, but in the very way the world understood human connection. Every bitter memory from that ill-fated dinner, every disparaging comment, had now been transmuted into a force that would propel me towards greatness. In that moment of isolation, I made a silent pact with myself. I would not allow the past to dictate my future. Instead, I would harness the raw energy of my pain and transform it into the drive to succeed, to innovate, and to build something that would outshine even the brightest lights of Silicon Valley. As the night wore on and the city outside continued its ceaseless hum, I finally set my phone aside and looked around the modest apartment that had become both my sanctuary and my battleground. In its quiet corners and unassuming walls, I felt the stirrings of a profound metamorphosis. The betrayal of the evening was painful, Yes, but it was also a turning point, a moment that had forced me to confront my deepest fears and emerge stronger, more determined than ever before. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of the past and the promise of the future converge into a single, unyielding purpose. I would not be defined by the cruelty of others, nor would I let their doubt stifle the light of my vision. Instead, I would rise from this heartbreak with a vigor that would make the world take notice. That night, as I finally allowed sleep to claim me, I did so with the bittersweet knowledge that every ending is also a beginning. The dinner had been shattered, a facade of wealth and family unity reduced to a tableau of betrayal and scorn. But from its ruins, I would build something magnificent. NanoNexus was more than a startup. It was the embodiment of my dreams, my sacrifices, and the indomitable spirit that had been forged in the crucible of personal pain. And as dawn crept over the horizon, I knew that the world was about to witness the sweetest revenge of all, the triumph of innovation over disdain, of passion over betrayal. I often find that the past has a peculiar way of revealing itself when I least expect it, and on quiet afternoons in my modest office, I sometimes allow my mind to drift back to the early days, the humble beginnings of NanoNexus. It was a time when dreams were nurtured in cramped garages in Oakland, where the only light came from flickering fluorescent bulbs, and the constant hum of machinery served as the backdrop to sleepless nights. I remember every detail with striking clarity, the scent of solder and the persistent buzz of hope that permeated every corner of our makeshift workshop. Those early days were not glamorous by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, they were often fraught with challenges that seemed insurmountable. Investors scoffed at the idea of a gadget capable of sensing and responding to human emotions, dismissing it as a far-fetched fantasy destined to remain in the realm of science fiction. But even as the doubters laughed, I held steadfast to my belief that there was something revolutionary about what we were building. I recall countless evenings spent hunched over schematics and prototypes, my vision illuminated by the soft glow of a single desk lamp. There was an almost obsessive drive in those moments, a single-minded focus on transforming abstract ideas into tangible reality. I was driven not by the desire for wealth or acclaim, but by the pure, unadulterated passion for innovation. It was during these times that I forged a bond with the very essence of creativity. I wasn't alone in my endeavors. Along the way, I found partners who shared my belief and who would stand by me even when the world around us seemed determined to undermine our dreams. Leon, our brilliant lead engineer, was one such ally. With a mind as sharp as a scalpel and an uncanny ability to solve problems that left others stumped, he was the backbone of our technical team. I remember the long nights we spent in that cramped space, our conversations punctuated by the whir of computer fans and the clack of keyboards as we debugged our prototype. Leon had an almost mystical intuition for technology, a rare blend of logic and creativity that allowed him to see solutions where others only saw obstacles. His quiet confidence and relentless work ethic were a constant reminder that greatness was often born from the crucible of adversity. Then there was Mia, our marketing dynamo, whose quick wit and perceptive insights breathed life into our technical marvel. Mia's role was pivotal. She was the one who could translate the complexity of our invention into a narrative that anyone could understand. With a keen sense for trends and an uncanny ability to read the market, she was the one who transformed our technical jargon into a story that resonated with both investors and consumers alike. I remember the heated debates we'd have, Mia insisting on simplicity and relatability while I argued for the intricate beauty of our technology. In the end, it was her vision that helped us secure the crucial funding needed to take NanoNexus from a fledgling concept to a serious contender in the tech world. I recall vividly the day we first held the prototype in our hands, a device that was more than just a gadget. It was a tangible embodiment of countless hours of toil and a testament to the audacity of our dreams. The device was sleek, its design a harmonious blend of form and function, and within its circuits lay the promise of a future where technology could seamlessly interact with the depths of human emotion. Every time I held it, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, as if I were cradling the future itself. In those early days, I was no stranger to ridicule and skepticism. Every pitch meeting, every conversation with a potential investor seemed to reaffirm the prevailing sentiment that our vision was too radical, too out of touch with reality. I remember the biting remarks, the dismissive gestures, and the ever-present air of condescension that many in the tech establishment exuded when confronted with our ideas. Yet, it was in the crucible of that relentless doubt that NanoNexus began to take shape. Every sneer and every dismissive comment became a silent challenge, a dare to prove that innovation could indeed break free from the shackles of conventional wisdom. Looking back, I now understand that those moments of scorn were not barriers but stepping stones, each one pushing me to refine my ideas and to work even harder. I would spend endless nights tweaking algorithms, optimizing circuits, and perfecting the delicate balance between hardware and software that would one day make our device truly revolutionary. The process was grueling and, at times, demoralizing, but it was also imbued with an almost sacred sense of purpose. Every setback was a lesson, every failure a precursor to eventual success. It wasn't merely about building a gadget. It was about challenging the status quo and daring to envision a world where technology and human emotion could coexist in a symbiotic harmony. The birth of NanoNexus was not an isolated event. It was the culmination of a journey marked by passion, persistence, and an unwavering belief in the power of innovation. With each passing day, the once dismissed idea began to evolve, gradually shedding its label of absurdity and transforming into something that promised to redefine the boundaries of what was possible. In those reflective moments, as I sat surrounded by remnants of our early prototypes and blueprints strewn across a cluttered workbench, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the sleepless nights, the endless cups of coffee, and most of all, for the friends and collaborators who had dared to believe in a dream that many thought impossible. Their unwavering support was the cornerstone upon which NanoNexus was built, a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed content with mediocrity. And now, as I stand on the precipice of a future that promises to vindicate every sacrifice and every moment of doubt, I am filled with an indescribable mix of nostalgia and anticipation. The memory of that cramped garage in Oakland is not one of hardship alone, but a vivid reminder of the spark that set our journey in motion. It is a spark that, despite all the trials and tribulations, has grown into a raging inferno, a force that will soon illuminate the path to our ultimate success. As I run my fingers over the cool, smooth surface of our latest prototype, I can almost hear the distant echoes of those early days, whispers of determination, echoes of passion, and the relentless beating of a heart that refused to yield to adversity. NanoNexus was not just a company or a gadget. It was a testament to the human spirit and the extraordinary potential that lies within those who dare to dream big. And as I prepare to step into the next chapter of my life, I carry with me the indelible mark of every struggle, every victory, and every moment of profound transformation that has defined this incredible journey. The day before the monumental press announcement dawned with an electric sense of inevitability. I woke early, long before the city stirred from its nocturnal slumber, and sat at my desk in the quiet of my modest apartment, a temporary haven that had become the war room for my impending triumph. Every detail mattered, every nuance of our strategy had been meticulously planned over the past months, and now the final act was upon us. The acquisition documents lay before me, their crisp, legal language a stark reminder of the tangible reality we had finally achieved. I spent hours poring over each clause, every signature and initial meticulously reviewed by Carmen Lee, my trusted attorney whose steely determination and razor-sharp mind had safeguarded my interests time and again. As I worked through the documents, a peculiar calm enveloped me, a serene confidence born from the countless hours of sleepless nights and relentless work that had culminated in this moment. With each carefully worded sentence, I could almost hear the resonant echo of my own inner voice. This is your destiny, and nothing can stand in your way. That morning, the city itself seemed to conspire in my favor. I drove through the neon-lit streets of San Francisco, each red light and turn a reminder of the long road that had brought me here. The urban landscape, with its blend of historical charm and futuristic ambition, whispered promises of redemption and the ultimate vindication of my dreams. The familiar hum of the city, the distant wail of sirens, the murmur of countless voices, seemed to echo my own heartbeat, steady and insistent, as if the city were urging me forward into the inevitable future that awaited. I remember the ride vividly, the way the cool morning air brushed against my face through the car window, carrying with it both a sense of anticipation and the weight of all that had transpired. Every red light, every stop sign was not just a pause in the journey, but a moment to reflect on the sacrifices that had brought me to this point. In those fleeting moments, I allowed my mind to wander back to the fateful dinner. The sting of betrayal, the echo of Vanessa's mocking words, and I could not help but feel that even that dark moment had been a necessary part of the journey. It had sharpened my resolve, and, in its own twisted way, had been the catalyst for the explosive success that was now within reach. Arriving at the office of NanoNexus headquarters, I was greeted by an atmosphere that was both celebratory and charged with anticipation. The sleek, modern campus buzzed with an energy that was almost palpable, a reflection of the tireless work of countless individuals who had poured their hearts into a dream that was now about to be realized on the grandest stage. As I walked through the glass doors and into the main atrium, I was met with nods of respect and knowing smiles from colleagues and staff who had been with me through every setback and every breakthrough. The building itself was a testament to our shared vision, a blend of minimalist design and cutting-edge technology, a physical embodiment of the future we had so painstakingly built. Inside a private conference room, Carmen and I pored over the final acquisition documents one last time. Her steady, reassuring presence provided a much-needed anchor amidst the swirling sea of anticipation. "Everything is in order," she assured me, her tone both professional and warm. I nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment settle over me like a mantle. It wasn't just the culmination of years of hard work. It was a turning point, the moment when every ounce of doubt, every sneer and every taunt would be forever silenced by the undeniable truth of success. I took a deep breath and allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. In that stillness, the vision of tomorrow played out in my mind's eye, a dazzling tableau of headlines, media interviews, and the reverberating impact of our achievement on the tech industry. I could see it all, the headline blazing across every major news outlet: Google acquires NanoNexus for $4.2 billion. Silicon Valley's boldest bet pays off. It was not just a statement of financial success, but a declaration that innovation, perseverance, and unwavering faith in one's vision could triumph over even the most crushing of betrayals. As I made my way back to my car, the documents safely tucked away, I felt as though I were on the cusp of a new life. Every street I passed, every neon sign flashing in the early morning light, was a reminder of the path that had led me to this moment. The city seemed to hum with anticipation, as if it too were eagerly awaiting the dawn of a new era, a future in which the boundaries of technology and human emotion would be redrawn by the very device I had once been ridiculed for creating. Driving home later that morning, my thoughts turned inward. I reflected on the long journey, from a cramped garage in Oakland to this very moment of poised triumph. Each hardship, every setback, was now woven into the tapestry of my story, a narrative that was destined to be remembered not for its failures, but for its fearless defiance in the face of adversity. I remembered the nights when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me, and the days when the skepticism of others nearly broke my resolve. Now, with the acquisition documents in my hands and a future illuminated by the promise of success, I felt an inner strength that I had only dreamed of in those early, uncertain days. The final countdown had begun, a silent yet thunderous rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. I was acutely aware that tomorrow would mark a pivotal moment in my life, one where every moment of pain and every act of betrayal would be transmuted into the triumph of innovation. The intricate dance of preparation and anticipation had reached its climax, and I was ready to step onto the stage where the world would bear witness to the power of unyielding perseverance. In that quiet morning drive, I silently pledged that I would embrace whatever the future held, not as a victim of past hurts, but as a visionary determined to forge ahead, guided by the lessons of the past and the limitless potential of the future. Returning to the quiet of my apartment later that day, I sat by the window and watched as the city slowly roused itself to the rhythm of a new day. The soft light of dawn revealed the scars of yesterday, but also illuminated the path ahead, a path paved with the promise of redemption and success. In those reflective moments, I felt the full weight of what was to come. The culmination of years of hard work, the bittersweet taste of betrayal, and the resounding victory that awaited me on the morrow. Every detail of that final countdown had been carefully orchestrated, and as the seconds ticked away, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of destiny. The world was about to witness not just a business acquisition, but the triumph of an idea, the validation of every sacrifice, and the transformation of a shattered past into a future defined by relentless innovation. Even as I reveled in the meticulous preparations for tomorrow's grand announcement, my thoughts kept returning to that fateful dinner and the faces that had marred what should have been a night of familial celebration. The memory of Vanessa's condescending laughter and Damien's haughty arrogance was as fresh as a wound that refused to heal. I recalled with bitter clarity the sound of their voices, Vanessa's mocking tone, Damien's dismissive sneer, as they toasted my supposed failure in front of a room full of our relatives. Each memory was a seed of betrayal that, over time, had germinated into a relentless drive within me. I had once believed in the promises of a shared future, a vision where love and ambition intertwined to create something beautiful. Yet in that moment, as the facade of our union crumbled before the eyes of our kin, I realized that the very people I had trusted had chosen to side with superficial success over genuine connection. That sense of betrayal was not a fleeting emotion but a persistent, smoldering flame that continued to burn even as the technical details of the acquisition consumed my waking thoughts. I found myself replaying that painful evening like a broken record, each detail a stark reminder of how far I had come and how those who had once been my closest allies had failed to see the brilliance in my vision. The seeds of betrayal that were planted that night had grown into an all-consuming determination, one that transformed every derisive comment into fuel for my ambition. I began to understand that every slight, every act of scorn, had pushed me further down the path of innovation. In the quiet moments before dawn, as I pored over the final details of the acquisition documents, I couldn't help but feel that this success was not merely a financial triumph. It was a poetic reclamation of my self-worth. The very people who had laughed at my so-called ridiculous gadget would soon have no choice but to acknowledge that every failure they had predicted had instead become the foundation of an empire. My mind raced with thoughts of what would happen when the truth of our achievement was broadcast to the world. The humiliation of that evening, so publicly inflicted upon me, was now a tool in my arsenal, a reminder that even in betrayal, there can be an unexpected source of strength and resolve. As the day wore on, I found myself grappling with a profound internal conflict. On one hand, there was the overwhelming sense of satisfaction that came with knowing I had defied the naysayers. On the other, there lingered the ache of personal loss, the shattered remnants of a marriage that once promised so much. I recalled the times when Vanessa and I had planned a future together, a future that, in her eyes, had been too intertwined with my so-called impractical dreams. The memory of those plans, once vibrant with hope, now lay scattered amidst the ruins of betrayal. Yet even as I mourned what had been lost, I couldn't ignore the undeniable fact that every negative word, every dismissive gesture had forced me to prove my worth in ways I never imagined possible. In a quiet moment that afternoon, I stood in front of a large mirror in my modest office, my eyes reflecting a blend of determination and introspection. I spoke aloud, as if addressing an audience that needed to witness my inner transformation. Every betrayal, every moment of scorn, has brought me closer to this moment, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging within. They may have intended to break me, but instead, they have forged in me a will of iron. The conviction in my words resonated deeply within me, echoing the long, arduous journey that had led me to this point. I felt as if I were on the threshold of not just a business triumph, but a personal renaissance, a moment when the seeds of betrayal would finally bear the fruit of undeniable success. In that solitary confrontation with my own reflection, I acknowledged the duality of my emotions. The triumph of NanoNexus was tempered by the harsh realities of personal loss and shattered dreams. But I resolved that I would not allow these painful memories to define me. Instead, I would use them as a catalyst, a reminder that every moment of doubt, every act of betrayal, was a stepping stone towards something far greater. I envisioned a future where the very people who had doubted me would be forced to reckon with the brilliance of my vision, where the same hands that had once ridiculed my dreams would now be extended in awe and admiration. The thought of that future filled me with a fierce, almost primal determination. I imagined the headlines that would soon grace every major publication, the astonished expressions of those who had once dismissed my ideas as nothing more than foolish whimsy. I pictured the conference calls with investors and the jubilant celebrations that would follow as the true magnitude of our success was revealed. Every bit of that imagined future was laced with a promise that the seeds of betrayal, however bitter they might have seemed, would ultimately reap consequences far sweeter than anyone could have anticipated. As I moved through the day, the memory of that tumultuous dinner and the subsequent betrayal remained a constant undercurrent in my thoughts. It was a force that both haunted and propelled me, a dual-edged reminder of the past that was inseparable from the drive that now defined my future. I could almost feel the eyes of those who had doubted me, Vanessa's dismissive gaze, Damien's haughty smirk, watching from afar, unaware that their contempt had only added fuel to the inferno of my ambition. The realization was both humbling and empowering. I was no longer the man they had once scorned, but the architect of a new era of innovation. That evening, as I finally sat down to prepare for tomorrow's events, I allowed myself a moment of quiet introspection. The seeds of betrayal that had once threatened to choke the very life out of my dreams were now the foundation upon which I would build a future that was unassailable. I knew that when the world woke up tomorrow, it would be greeted not just by the dawn of a new day, but by the undeniable truth that innovation, perseverance, and a relentless pursuit of excellence could transform even the deepest wounds into the driving force behind an extraordinary legacy. In the stillness of my office, I wrote down a single, resolute thought. Let every slight become a stepping stone, every betrayal a testament to the strength within. With that final note, I closed my journal, feeling an almost sacred resolve settle over me. A resolve that promised that the consequences of betrayal would be both public and profound, a final reckoning that would forever alter the landscape of my life and the world of technology. Dawn arrived over the Bay Area with a quiet majesty, as if nature itself were heralding the day of reckoning that had been months in the making. I awoke in my modest apartment, a temporary refuge that had borne witness to both despair and hope, feeling a calm determination that belied the tumultuous events of recent days. At precisely 6:30 a.m., my phone erupted with a barrage of notifications. CNBC, Bloomberg, and every major news outlet seemed to have caught wind of the seismic shift that was unfolding. As I reached for my phone with a steady hand, I watched in almost surreal silence as my face appeared on live television alongside the announcement that had the power to redefine my entire existence. Google acquires NanoNexus for $4.2 billion, the boldest bet in tech history. The moment was both humbling and transformative, a public acknowledgement of every hardship, every sleepless night, and every ounce of defiance that had brought me to this point. I sat there, silent and resolute, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. In that instant, I felt as if the universe were aligning itself to validate my choices. The voices of the doubters, the sneers, the mocking laughter, faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the resounding affirmation that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The news outlets churned with praise, interviews were lined up, and the entire world seemed poised to acknowledge that the man they once dismissed had become a beacon of innovation. The day unfolded in a blur of congratulatory calls, messages, and impromptu interviews. Investors, partners, and even former skeptics reached out to commend the audacity of NanoNexus. Yet, even as the accolades poured in and the world celebrated the acquisition as one of the greatest success stories in tech history, I could not shake the quiet undercurrent of personal pain that lingered beneath it all. Every congratulatory word was tempered by the memory of that shattering dinner. Every cheer was juxtaposed against the ghosts of betrayal that haunted my thoughts. I navigated through the day with a calm determination, a silent promise that while the world saw a triumph, I would never forget the cost at which it had come. The press conference later that morning was a whirlwind of carefully curated statements and measured responses. I stood before a sea of reporters, my expression composed yet betraying the complex emotions swirling beneath the surface. I answered each question with a quiet confidence, mindful of the significance of every word I spoke. The camera flashes and rapid-fire inquiries were a stark contrast to the intimate solitude of those early morning moments in my apartment. Yet each question felt like another step in the reclamation of my identity. I spoke not just as the founder of NanoNexus, but as a man who had transformed personal heartbreak into a force for innovation. Every word I uttered was imbued with the weight of my journey, the countless nights spent in solitude, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of a dream that was now a global phenomenon. Even as I fielded the barrage of questions, my mind wandered to the faces of those who had once doubted me. I saw Vanessa's dismissive smirk and Damien's arrogant gaze reflected in the astonished eyes of the audience. Their memory was a bittersweet reminder of the past that had, in many ways, been essential to my transformation. The public declaration of NanoNexus' success was not merely a business triumph. It was an act of personal reclamation. I realized that the very events that had once threatened to unravel my life were now the catalysts for my ultimate vindication. Throughout the day, as the media frenzy reached its crescendo, I found solace in quiet moments of reflection. I would step away from the spotlight, retreating into a small, private office space where the noise of the world could not penetrate. There, amidst the hum of computers and the soft rustle of papers, I allowed myself to absorb the full magnitude of the day. The acquisition had been more than a financial transaction. It was a symbolic moment, a clear message to all who had ever doubted my vision that true innovation is born of perseverance and relentless passion. As I sat there, reviewing the day's events, I could almost feel the collective heartbeat of Silicon Valley, the quiet, unyielding pulse of ambition and the promise of a future where every risk was rewarded. The sense of purpose that had carried me through the darkest moments of despair was now more potent than ever. I realized that the journey was far from over. The day of reckoning was merely the prologue to an even greater chapter, one where the true impact of NanoNexus would unfold on a global stage. I took a moment to reflect on the irony of it all. The very technology that many had dismissed as ridiculous was now being hailed as the future of emotional intelligence and technology. The acquisition by a giant like Google was not only a testament to our innovation, but a vindication of every sacrifice made along the way. In that quiet moment of introspection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the pain that had sharpened my resolve, and for the betrayal that had forced me to tap into reservoirs of strength I never knew I possessed. As the day drew to a close, I stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the twinkling lights of the Bay Area. The cool night air was filled with the gentle murmur of the city, an ever-present reminder of the relentless energy that fueled Silicon Valley. I stood there, absorbing the full breadth of the day's triumphs and tribulations, and silently vowed that this moment, this day of reckoning, would forever stand as a turning point in my life. I had faced the world with both humility and defiance, and now it was time to embrace the future with open arms. Every harsh word from the past, every moment of betrayal, had led to this singular moment of clarity, a moment when the world learned what I had known all along: that success, no matter how hard-fought, is the sweetest form of redemption. In the aftermath of the public announcement, my days became a whirlwind of activity. A dizzying array of meetings, interviews, and celebrations that left little room for introspection. The halls of NanoNexus headquarters pulsed with energy as employees and investors alike reveled in our newfound success. Every congratulatory handshake, every effusive remark from a colleague, was a stark reminder that my invention, once ridiculed as an absurd fantasy, had now been validated on the grandest stage. I walked the corridors with a measured confidence, aware of every nod and smile that seemed to acknowledge not only the triumph of NanoNexus, but the personal journey that had led me to this moment. Yet amid the public accolades, there lingered an undercurrent of private pain, a quiet, persistent ache that no amount of praise could fully assuage. Each time I passed by a group of celebrating colleagues, I couldn't help but be reminded of that fateful dinner where every laugh, every mocking glance from Vanessa and Damien had been a dagger in my heart. The public triumph was undeniable, but the scars of betrayal remained etched deep within me, a bittersweet contrast to the jubilant atmosphere around me. I found solace in moments of solitude in my corner office, a room that had become a sanctuary from the relentless pace of corporate triumph. There, amid the quiet hum of modern technology and the soft rustle of papers, I allowed myself to dwell on the complexity of my emotions. I realized that success, however grand, often came at a cost. Every accolade, every congratulatory message was a reminder of what I had lost, and the paradox was not lost on me. I spent long hours reflecting on the nature of achievement, questioning whether the price of this public triumph was too high. I thought of the long nights spent coding and calibrating, the quiet moments of doubt that had crept in when the world around me seemed intent on dismissing my dreams, and the painful memory of that public humiliation that had, in a cruel twist of fate, propelled me towards greatness. Yet, even as the private pain of betrayal gnawed at the edges of my newfound success, I took solace in the fact that every moment of anguish had been a necessary step towards the man I had become. The journey had been fraught with loss, yet it was these very experiences that had imbued my success with a deeper, more profound meaning. I found that the corridors of NanoNexus were lined with silent testimonies to our struggles, a framed schematic here, a photo of the early prototype there, each artifact a relic of the long and arduous road we had traversed. In those quiet spaces, I could almost hear the echoes of every challenge we had overcome, every derisive remark that had fueled our determination. The public celebration was not merely about the financial success or the prestige of being acquired by a tech giant. It was about the triumph of an idea, a dream that had withstood the test of ridicule and adversity. In the midst of the celebrations, I would occasionally find myself lost in thought, wondering if the voices of the past had truly been silenced by the magnitude of our achievement. I recalled the condescending laughter of Vanessa and the smug assurances of Damien, memories that, despite the public triumph, still managed to wound me with their raw sting. Those moments of betrayal were like shadows that clung to my every step, even as I basked in the glow of success. And yet, I refused to let them define the narrative of my life. Instead, I embraced them as part of the journey, a reminder that every great triumph is tempered by sacrifice and loss. Late in the evening, as the celebrations wound down and the once bustling office corridors grew quiet, I found myself alone in the solitude of my office. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of city lights filtering through the windows, and in that quiet darkness, I allowed myself a moment of honest reflection. I thought about the cost of public success, about the hidden toll of sacrifices made in the pursuit of innovation. The triumph of NanoNexus was not just a celebration of a groundbreaking technology. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a declaration that even the deepest wounds could give rise to something magnificent. I sat at my desk, the weight of my thoughts pressing in around me, and I began to write in a journal, a habit I had resumed as a way to process the complex tapestry of emotions that now defined my life. I wrote about the irony of my public triumph, about the bittersweet blend of pride and pain that had come to define my journey. I acknowledged that while the world now saw a man whose invention had revolutionized technology, there remained a private part of me that still grieved the loss of a shared dream, a dream that had been shattered on that ill-fated dinner table. As I poured my thoughts onto the pages, I realized that true triumph was not just measured in billions or headlines, but in the courage to face one's inner demons and to transform pain into purpose. The public celebration of NanoNexus was a milestone, but the real victory lay in the quiet, relentless determination that had carried me through every setback and every moment of betrayal. In that solitary act of reflection, I found a measure of peace, a fragile yet steadfast hope that the scars of the past would eventually fade, replaced by the lasting legacy of innovation and perseverance. That night, as I finally closed the journal and prepared to leave my office, I stepped out onto a quiet balcony and looked up at the star-strewn sky. The city lights twinkled below like distant promises, and in that silent communion with the night, I resolved that I would not let the private pain of betrayal eclipse the public triumph of NanoNexus. Instead, I would carry the lessons of the past as both a shield and a beacon, a reminder that even in the midst of celebration, it was the quiet strength forged in solitude and sorrow that truly defined my legacy. As the afternoon wore on, the air at NanoNexus headquarters was charged with an almost surreal energy, a blend of triumph and unresolved tension that seemed to simmer beneath every conversation and every congratulatory handshake. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting with key members of the executive team when the glass doors of my office swung open with a force that momentarily halted the steady cadence of my thoughts. I looked up, and there he was, Damian Roth. Clad in an impeccably tailored suit that screamed wealth and entitlement, he stood at the threshold of my sanctuary, his eyes wide with desperation, a look I had never associated with the once arrogant figure who had so brazenly mocked me not so long ago. Damian's voice wavered as he spoke, his tone a dissonant mix of humility and urgency that seemed to betray the man I had once seen as nothing more than a pampered symbol of everything I had lost. "Please, let me work for you," he pleaded, his words hanging in the air like a fragile truce extended from an enemy. The audacity of his request was almost surreal. Here was the man who had once laughed at my vision, now reduced to a state of desperate supplication before the very embodiment of my triumph. In that moment, time seemed to slow as I studied his expression, searching for any hint of sincerity beneath the layers of pride and regret. His eyes, normally brimming with the self-assured glint of someone who had always been on top of the world, were now clouded with uncertainty. It was as if the tables had turned so completely that even his identity, once so firmly anchored in arrogance, was now trembling on the precipice of disintegration. I felt a complex cocktail of emotions surge within me. Vindication, of course, for the undeniable reversal of fortunes, but also a profound sadness that the very person who had once shared in my life's journey now found himself stripped of all pretensions, reduced to seeking solace in the only place that seemed to offer refuge, my company. The office, once filled with the buoyant energy of celebration, now seemed to hold its breath as I contemplated his plea. My mind raced back to that humiliating dinner, to the moments when Damian's laughter had mingled with Vanessa's disdain, a memory that now served as a potent reminder of the fragility of ego and the ephemeral nature of power. I felt as though I were standing at the crossroads of justice and mercy, with every fiber of my being screaming for a response that would be both measured and resolute. Damian's eyes darted nervously around, as if seeking validation or perhaps forgiveness, and in that brief pause I sensed the full weight of his realization. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. No longer was he the benefactor of entitlement. He was now a man laid bare by his own hubris, a man whose status and fortune were now in jeopardy. His plea was not just an attempt to salvage his reputation. It was a desperate bid for relevance in a world where the roles had been reversed. I spoke slowly, each word carefully measured. "Damian, what exactly are you asking for?" My voice, though calm, carried the undercurrent of every slight that had brought us to this moment. The silence that followed was thick with the unspoken history between us, a history of pride, betrayal, and now, an unexpected vulnerability. Damian hesitated, his eyes flickering with a mix of hope and dread, before he finally spoke, his tone barely above a whisper. I need to be part of something real. I need to prove that I can do more than just flaunt my wealth. I need to learn from you, to be part of what you're building." For a long moment, the room seemed to stretch out interminably, the weight of his words pressing down on me like a tangible force. Part of me wanted nothing more than to let him wallow in the consequences of his past actions, to stand as a silent monument to the downfall of arrogance. And yet, even in that moment, I sensed that his plea was tinged with an honesty I had not expected. The raw vulnerability in his voice, the desperate glimmer in his eyes. It was a reflection of a man who had finally come to understand that success was not merely a matter of status or wealth, but of vision, hard work, and a willingness to learn from even the harshest of teachers. I motioned for him to sit, the subtle clink of his expensive cufflinks on the polished floor a reminder of the world he once ruled. As he sank into the chair opposite me, I allowed myself a moment of introspection. Could it be that the very man who had once derided my work was now seeking redemption at my feet? It was a conundrum that both irked and intrigued me, an embodiment of the unpredictable twists of fate that had led me to this moment. I was tempted to let my silence speak for itself, to allow the gravity of the situation to settle without my intervention. Yet, as I looked into his eyes, I recognized a reflection of the transformation that I myself had undergone. In that shared vulnerability, there was an echo of the realization that sometimes, the path to greatness required not just triumph, but also the willingness to extend a hand to those who had once been lost in their own arrogance. I chose my words carefully. Damien, you must understand that what I'm building here is not just a business. It's a testament to the power of innovation, perseverance, and the belief that even the most derided ideas can change the world. I can't promise you a place here without proving that you have what it takes to contribute meaningfully. This isn't charity, and it certainly isn't a second chance handed out lightly. My tone was both a challenge and a warning, a clear signal that while the door might be open for him, it would not be done without significant change and genuine effort. Damien's eyes flickered with a mix of relief and apprehension. He nodded slowly, as if the gravity of my words had finally penetrated the armor of his pride. I understand, he said, his voice steadier now, though still laced with a hint of desperation. I'm willing to work hard. I want to learn, if you'll let me. That simple admission, that flicker of genuine desire to change, stirred something within me, a long-dormant empathy that had been buried beneath layers of ambition and the scars of betrayal. In that moment, I recognized that true growth often comes from unexpected sources. Damien's plea was not an act of capitulation, but a humble request for redemption. And while I couldn't ignore the pain he had once caused, I also understood that the path to greatness was rarely a solitary journey. It was a mosaic of triumphs, setbacks, and the unexpected alliances that emerged from the crucible of shared ambition. I leaned back in my chair and allowed a measured pause to settle between us. Very well, I said finally, my voice firm but not unkind. I'll give you an opportunity. But know this, the stakes are high, and you'll be held to the same standards of excellence that define everything we do here. If you're truly serious about contributing, you'll have to prove yourself, every day without exception. Damien nodded again, this time with a resolve that, while tentative, hinted at the possibility of transformation. In that moment, the office seemed to bear witness to the shifting dynamics of power and pride, a subtle yet profound acknowledgement that even the most embittered rivals could find common ground when confronted with the undeniable force of destiny. I could see that his plea was not just about salvaging a crumbling reputation, but about the possibility of learning and evolving in a world that respected merit above all else. As I dismissed the meeting and returned to my own work, the echoes of that encounter reverberated in my mind. Damien's unexpected request had opened a door, not just for him, but for a new chapter in my own journey. It was a reminder that success was not a closed circuit of isolated triumphs, but an ever-evolving process that sometimes required extending grace even to those who had once been your fiercest detractors. In that moment, I resolved that my future would be defined not just by public accolades and groundbreaking innovation, but by the courage to forge new paths in the face of betrayal, and by the willingness to see potential in the most unlikely of places. The encounter with Damien had left me in a state of inner tumult, a maelstrom of emotions that ranged from reluctant compassion to a burning desire for unequivocal justice. The day had worn on with the triumphant echoes of NanoNexus's success, but as twilight fell over the Bay Area, an undercurrent of darkness began to assert itself in the quiet corridors of my private thoughts. I found myself alone in a deserted hallway behind the office building, far removed from the celebratory buzz of the main campus. The dim lighting and the cold, unyielding walls seemed to mirror the hardened resolve that was building within me. There, in the secluded confines of that hallway, I encountered Damien once more. The same man who had just moments earlier pleaded for a second chance now stood before me with an expression that betrayed both desperation and fear. The air was thick with tension, every echo of our footsteps resonating with the weight of a reckoning long overdue. His earlier words, "Please, let me work for you," reverberated in my mind like a mocking refrain, a reminder of the arrogance and betrayal that had once defined our interactions. As I approached him, every sense sharpened by the charged atmosphere, I felt a surge of emotions that I had struggled to contain since that fateful dinner. The pain of betrayal, the humiliation of being publicly ridiculed, and the inner torment of every insult hurled at my dreams coalesced into a single, overwhelming impulse. It was an impulse born not merely of anger, but of the raw need to assert that betrayal would never go unanswered. In that dimly lit corridor, the boundary between justice and vengeance blurred, and every nerve in my body vibrated with a quiet, calculated fury. Damien's eyes met mine, and in that fleeting moment I saw not the haughty arrogance of the past, but a deep-seated terror. A terror that came from the realization that his former life, built on the illusions of wealth and entitlement, was crumbling before him. His pleas seemed to echo faintly in the cold silence, the very words, "Please, let me work for you," now transformed into a desperate whisper of a man on the brink of ruin. Yet, in that charged silence, I knew that words alone were no longer sufficient. The scales of retribution had already begun to tip, and a moment of raw, unfiltered justice was inevitable. Without a word, I closed the distance between us, my actions deliberate and measured. I reached out, gripping him firmly by the collar, ensuring that there was no escape from the consequences of his past actions. The corridor, bathed in a dim, unforgiving light, seemed to hold its breath as I pulled him close. His eyes widened, and for a brief, agonizing second, I could see the vestiges of the man he once pretended to be, arrogant, untouchable, and unrepentant. But that image was quickly replaced by the undeniable reality of his vulnerability. In that moment of charged intensity, the desire for symbolic retribution surged through me. It was not an act of mindless violence, but a carefully calculated gesture, a message that betrayal and exploitation, no matter how cleverly cloaked in charm and wealth, would always exact a price. With a swift, almost clinical motion, I drew a small, concealed blade from my pocket. A tool that had been with me through countless moments of self-defense, each time a silent testament to my resolve. In one decisive act, I pressed the blade against his tongue. The act was swift, a deliberate incision that sent a shockwave of pain and realization through him. The cut was not meant to maim or to kill, but to serve as an indelible symbol, a physical manifestation of the consequences that awaited those who dared to trample on my dreams and dignity. The sound of his stifled cry, echoing off the cold, hard walls of the hallway, was a symphony of poetic justice, a final note in a long-standing chorus of betrayal. In that violent moment, every slight, every act of scorn, found its retribution. I could feel the flood of emotions, the seething anger, the profound sorrow, and the bitter satisfaction, coursing through me in equal measure. It was as if the act had exorcised every demon of the past, if only for a fleeting moment. Yet, even as I released my grip and stepped back, I was acutely aware that this was not a moment of triumph to be celebrated with unchecked jubilation. Rather, it was a stark, painful acknowledgement that vengeance, though momentarily satisfying, came with a heavy toll. As Damien writhed in pain, his voice now a broken whisper of regret, I felt a deep, resonant conflict within me. The act had been necessary, a final, unequivocal statement to anyone who might dare to challenge my vision or undermine the integrity of what I had built, but it also left behind a residue of sorrow that would be impossible to ignore. I left Damien in that cold, echoing corridor, the silence of the night serving as a somber reminder that every action, no matter how justified it might seem in the moment, carried its own weight of consequence. As I walked away, the image of his broken form was seared into my memory, a haunting reminder that even the most calculated acts of retribution could never fully erase the scars of betrayal. The violent retribution was not merely about inflicting pain. It was a message to the world, a declaration that those who sought to exploit and demean would ultimately be met with uncompromising consequences. In the solitude of the night, as I returned to the quiet sanctum of my office, the adrenaline slowly subsiding. I was left alone with the inescapable truth of my actions. I questioned, with a mixture of regret and acceptance, whether this act of retribution would be the catalyst for my ultimate redemption, or if it would haunt me as a specter of unchecked vengeance. The answer was not immediately clear, but one thing was undeniable. Every scar, every act of violence born out of betrayal, would shape the man I was destined to become. In the hours that followed that harrowing night, I found refuge in the solitude of my private office, a sanctuary where the clamor of success and the echoes of violence could finally be laid to rest. The adrenaline that had fueled my actions had begun to ebb, leaving behind a quiet void filled with reflection and, surprisingly, a tentative sense of redemption. I sat at my desk, the documents of NanoNexus Triumph still spread out before me, and allowed my mind to wander back over the tumultuous journey that had led me here. From the early days in a cramped Oakland garage to the searing pain of betrayal, and ultimately to the violent act that had symbolized my refusal to be underestimated. The events of the past few days swirled in my thoughts like a complex tapestry, each thread woven from moments of exultation, heartbreak, and the unyielding drive to prove myself. I reflected on the irony that while the public celebrated my success, I was left to confront the moral ambiguities of my actions in isolation. The memory of that violent retribution still pulsed in my veins, a reminder that in the quest for justice, sometimes the line between symbolic gesture and irrevocable loss could blur into a single, defining moment. I couldn't help but wonder whether the scars, both physical and emotional, that now marked my journey would serve as a permanent reminder of the price of ambition. As I pored over the details of our acquisition and the milestones of NanoNexus, I began to understand that true redemption was not found solely in acts of retribution or in the blinding light of public triumph. Instead, it was hidden in the quiet moments of introspection, in the recognition that every decision, no matter how painful, was a step towards shaping the person I was meant to be. I wrote in my journal, my pen scratching across the pages with a fervor that matched the storm inside me. Vengeance is not the end, but a difficult lesson learned on the road to redemption. True growth comes from acknowledging our darkest moments and finding the strength to transform them into a legacy of innovation and resilience. The act that had so violently echoed the retribution of the past had also, in its own brutal way, forced me to confront the raw complexities of my humanity. I questioned whether the pain inflicted on Damien, though seemingly justified by the betrayal he embodied, might one day cast a long shadow over the success I had fought so fiercely to achieve. The ethical weight of that moment pressed upon me as heavily as any failure or setback from the past, but I resolved that I would not allow guilt or remorse to define me. Instead, I would let those scars serve as reminders that every choice had consequences, and that the path to redemption was paved with the lessons of both triumph and tragedy. In the quiet of that reflective night, I also thought about the people who had stood by me, the loyal partners like Leon and Mia, who had weathered the storm of ridicule and betrayal with unwavering belief in our vision. Their silent support was a testament to the idea that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, the bonds forged in the crucible of shared struggle could become the foundation of lasting redemption. I made a promise to myself then, to honor their belief, to continue building NanoNexus into not just a technological marvel, but a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. I recognized that redemption was not an endpoint but a continuous journey, a process of evolving, learning, and, above all, embracing both the light and the darkness within me. The scars that marked my past would serve not as reminders of weakness, but as badges of honor. Proof that I had dared to rise above the pain and transform it into something greater. With each line I wrote, with each reflection on the events that had defined my recent past, I felt a renewed sense of purpose settling in. I was determined to ensure that every mistake, every moment of anger, would be transmuted into the fuel that powered the next phase of my life. A phase where my vision for NanoNexus and for myself would continue to reshape not only the tech industry but the very notion of what it meant to triumph over adversity. That night, as I finally closed my journal and prepared to leave the solitude of my office, I looked out of the window at the city below, a sprawling testament to human ingenuity, ambition, and the unending pursuit of progress. In that quiet moment, I realized that redemption was not about erasing the past, but about acknowledging it, learning from it, and forging a future that was defined by both wisdom and compassion. I felt a deep, resolute determination to carry the lessons of my journey forward, to let each scar, each painful memory, serve as a stepping stone to an even greater legacy. As I stepped away from my desk and into the dim light of the hallway, I vowed that I would not let the bitterness of betrayal or the violence of retribution overshadow the promise of what lay ahead. I would be guided by a newfound understanding that every act, be it of innovation or retribution, had the power to shape not only my destiny but the destiny of an entire industry. And in that commitment, I found a glimmer of true redemption, a promise that even the darkest moments could ultimately lead to a future illuminated by hope, progress, and the relentless drive to build something that transcended personal vendettas.